Let me have your attention, not for my sake, but for your soul. I didn't come here today to entertain you, to tickle your ears, or to tell you something easy. I came here with a burden that's too heavy to carry in silence. And I'm asking you just for a few moments to shut out the noise of the world, to silence the voices that have been lying to you since the day you were born, and to listen, not because I have something clever to say, but because what you're about to hear may very well be the most important thing you've ever had to wrestle with in your life. There is a word from God today, and I don't say that lightly. Not a new word, not some trendy self-help nonsense wrapped in Christian language. I'm talking about the eternal word, the truth that has always been, the truth that breaks chains, exposes idols, and confronts comforts. A truth that many churches won't say anymore because they're too afraid of losing the crowd. But I'm not here to please you. I'm here to wake you up. The title of this message is not meant to be catchy. It's not a slogan. It's a prophetic confrontation. God said, don't look for a job. Now, before you tune me out thinking this is some reckless idea, hear me. I'm not calling you to laziness. I'm not telling you to abandon responsibility. I'm calling you to abandon the system of this world and come under the lordship of Jesus Christ. Because for far too long we've allowed ourselves to be defined by our careers, trained by a world that doesn't know God, and driven by fears that faith is supposed to destroy. You weren't created to survive, you were created to serve. You weren't born just to work, you were born to worship. But the tragedy is, many of us will live and die without ever asking what God actually put us here to do. This isn't a game. This isn't a motivational talk. This is a war for your soul. And before you decide whether to keep listening, ask yourself one thing. Do I really want to know why I'm alive? If your answer is yes, then stay with me, because everything in your life may depend on what comes next. You know what's terrifying? What really shakes me? It's this. The number of people who claim to follow Christ, who show up in churches, who sing the songs, quote the verses, wear the Christian label, and yet they've never once asked God what He wants them to do with their life. Not once. They've lived their entire lives on autopilot, moving from one expectation to the next. School, job, career, family, retirement, death. It's the rhythm of this world, and it's swallowed them whole. And here's the tragedy. They think it's normal. They think it's wisdom. They think they're being responsible. And if you question it, if you dare challenge the idea that you were not created to be another cog in the machine, they'll look at you like you've lost your mind. But I'm here to tell you that God did not design you to look for a job. He didn't put breath in your lungs so you could chase a paycheck. He didn't form you in your mother's womb so you could just survive and retire in comfort. That's not purpose. That's not calling, that's captivity. And the reason this message is so hard for some of you to swallow is because you've been decided more by the world than by the word. You've been trained by a culture that worships productivity, status, titles, and financial security. You've been shaped by a system that measures a person's worth by their net worth, not by their obedience to God. And if that doesn't grieve your soul, then something is deeply wrong. Let me ask you something. When did God say, go find a job and try not to sin too much along the way? When did He say, just do what everyone else does and I'll be pleased? You won't find that in Scripture. What you will find is a God who calls men and women to die to themselves, to deny their own will, to surrender their plans and ambitions, and to follow Him into the unknown. That's not comfortable, that's not predictable, that doesn't fit on a resume, and that's exactly why most people want nothing to do with it. But don't tell me you follow Jesus and then live like the world. Don't tell me you belong to the King and yet chase the same things the world chases. If your life looks no different than your unbelieving neighbors, same goals, same priorities, same dreams, then you've got to ask yourself, who's really your Lord? Because listen, this idea that we need to go out and find a job is built on the assumption that you are your own master, that your life belongs to you, that it's up to you to chart your course, to plan your future, to secure your own provision. And that kind of thinking is not just dangerous, it's demonic. You were never meant to be self-directed. You were never meant to write your own script. You were meant to be led by God. And if He is not the one leading you, then someone else is, whether it's the world, your fears, your parents' expectations, or your own pride. Now hear me carefully. I am not saying labor is evil. God calls us to diligence. But the question is not whether you work. The question is who you're working for. Is it the system of this age, or is it the kingdom of heaven? Are you serving mammon, or are you serving the living God? You were not created for the American dream. You were not formed in the image of God so you could spend 40 years clocking in and out, accumulating stuff that will burn, only to die with a headstone that says, he was a good employee. That's not legacy. That's not obedience. That's not faith. Faith says, God, I'm yours. Every part of me, my future, my career, my time, my gifts, my energy, I lay it down at your feet. Tell me what to do. Show me where to go. Command me. That's what it means to follow Christ. And I know that kind of surrender terrifies people because we want control. We want to know what's next. We want a 5-year plan, a savings account, and a backup strategy in case God doesn't show up. But here's the problem with that kind of thinking. It leaves no room for real faith. We say we trust God, but we make decisions as if He's not even there. We say we believe He's our provider, but we live like orphans, scrambling to take care of ourselves. We say we want His will, but we've already written our own. If you belong to Jesus, you don't get to choose your direction. You don't get to say, I'll follow you, Lord, but only if it pays well, only if it's safe, only if it fits my lifestyle. No. Following Christ means death to self. It means dying to the job you thought you wanted, the career you imagined, the life you had planned so that you can live the life He ordained. And I promise you, when you lay it all down, what you get in return is so much greater than anything the world could ever offer. You get to walk in the purposes of God. You get to live for things that matter in eternity. You get to see lives changed, souls saved, and a kingdom advanced, not because you chased a job, but because you obeyed a call. But that begins with one decision. Whose voice are you listening to? Are you being led by the shepherd, or are you being driven by the culture? Because if God said, don't look for a job, and instead told you to seek His will, would you listen? Would you go? That's the question that will define your life. There is something the world will never tell you. It won't shout it from the billboards. It won't whisper it in your ear during your performance reviews. It won't show up on your college syllabus or in the corner office of your career dreams, but it needs to be said. Your calling is not found in the marketplace. Your calling is not to pursue Christ. We've got it backwards. We really do. We spend years training ourselves to ask the wrong questions. What job should I take? What industry pays the best? Where can I make a living? And when those are the only questions guiding your life, you are already building on the wrong foundation. Because the right question, the one that breaks you, the one that redefines everything, is this: God, what have you put me on this earth to do? Let's be honest, most people never ask that. Or if they do, it's after they've already set the course of their life, after the degree has been earned, after the resume is polished, after the job is accepted, after the soul has already been handed over to the machine of the world. But we don't serve a God who waits to be scheduled in after your career plans are laid out. We don't serve a king who stands quietly in the background while you chase promotions, hoping for a few leftover scraps of your time and heart. He is not a God to be fit into your 5-year plan. He is a Lord to be followed wherever He leads. And here's the tragedy. Most Christians are taught to use God to bless the path they've already chosen. They don't fall on their knees before Him and ask, Lord, what would you have me do? They just pick a path that looks stable, then ask God to make it successful. They treat Him like a consultant, not a king. They use prayer as a backup plan, not a battlefield cry. But you weren't made to blend in with the world's system. You were bought with a price. You were set apart for a purpose. And that purpose is not simply to find a job. It is to fulfill a mission. God didn't save you so you could live for weekends and vacation time. He didn't raise you up out of sin so you could settle for a salary and a schedule. He called you to Himself. He marked you with His Spirit. He gave you a commission, not a contract. That's why the idea of just finding a job is so dangerous. Because when you settle for what the world says is normal, you lose sight of the supernatural. When you reduce your life to a paycheck, you forfeit the power of God's direction. And many of you, though you might not admit it, you feel that ache. You feel that restlessness in your soul. You're going through the motions, working the job, collecting the income. But something inside of you is screaming, there's more than this. And you're right, because God doesn't speak in job descriptions. He speaks in callings. And a calling can't be defined by a resume. It isn't confined to what the economy can offer you. It doesn't fit neatly into job markets and LinkedIn profiles. When God calls you, he calls you to himself first, and then he sends you out, but only after he's broken you. Only after he's emptied you of your self-made ambitions. Only after he's taught you to listen. The world says, pick your career. God says, die to yourself. The world says, follow your passion. God says, follow me. The world says, find something stable. God says, step out on the water. And if you think those two paths will lead to the same destination, you are mistaken. I've seen it over and over. Young men, women full of zeal, starting strong, but somewhere along the way they traded the fire of their calling for the comfort of a steady paycheck. They got tired of waiting on God's timing. They got weary of explaining their faith-driven decisions to people who didn't understand, so they gave in. They chose a life that was predictable over a life that was powerful, and though they may be admired by the world, their hearts have grown cold to the things of God. You want to know if you're walking in your calling? Then ask yourself this. Is what I'm doing right now something I chose because it made sense, or something I obeyed because he told me? Because calling doesn't always make sense. It doesn't come with benefits packages. Sometimes it leads you into hard places. Sometimes it puts you in obscurity. Sometimes it costs you everything. But it's always worth it. Let me ask you, what are you building? Are you building a life that will be applauded by man, or one that will be rewarded by God? Are you chasing a future that makes sense on paper, or a purpose that can only be explained by obedience? We have too many Christians who are well trained but not well sent. Too many who have skills but no surrender, degrees but no direction, hustle but no holiness, and the world applauds them, but heaven is not impressed by men who blend in. Heaven moves for men who bow low, who wait long, who obey fast, even when it cost them everything. You weren't made to simply survive this world, you were made to shake it. But that will never happen if you keep asking the same questions the world asks. That will never happen if you keep chasing what everyone else is chasing. That will never happen if you keep looking for a job instead of falling on your face and crying out, God, use me, whatever the call. So no, God did not say go look for a job. He said follow me. And when you do, you won't just make a living, you make an eternal impact. That's what you were born for. You see, we live in a time where people confuse busyness with obedience, where being occupied is mistaken for being faithful, and where provision is no longer a matter of trusting God, but of controlling outcomes. And that mindset, this subtle, dangerous belief that you must secure your own future or it will fall apart, has crept into the church. It's infected how we make decisions. It's infected how we raise our children. It's infected how we interpret our callings. And it's not just wrong, it's deadly to your walk with God. Let me say something hard, and I hope it rattles you. Many people in the church today are not following Christ. They are following opportunity. They are not led by the Spirit. They are led by the fear of not having enough. They don't pray for guidance. They calculate risks. They don't fast. They negotiate salaries. And all the while they say, God bless my decision, when they never asked him in the first place. How many Christians choose a job not based on calling, but on comfort? How many pick a city not because God sent them, but because the cost of living was right and the benefits package looked appealing? And then they slap God's name on it and say, this is where he's leading me. No, that's where you are leading yourself. There's a difference between provision and permission. Just because you're making money doesn't mean you're in the will of God. Just because the door opened doesn't mean he wanted you to walk through it. You can be successful in the eyes of the world and still be completely disobedient in the eyes of God. Let me ask you, when did the call of God become subject to your bank account? When did faith begin taking cues from fear? Where in the scriptures do you see the men and women of God choosing their paths based on what made the most financial sense? Abraham left everything he knew and walked into a land he didn't understand. Moses turned his back on the riches of Egypt and chose the suffering of his people. The disciples left their boats, their income, their provision, their livelihoods to follow a man with no place to lay his head. They had one question: what is God saying? And that question govern every decision. But today we ask, what's the salary? What's the risk? What's the upside? What will I lose? And we want to follow God without denying ourselves. We want to obey Him without sacrificing anything. We want the narrow road as long as it's paved and safe and has good Wi-Fi. But that's not the gospel. That's not obedience. And if we're honest, it's not even faith. Faith doesn't calculate how much you'll have left over. Faith doesn't wait until the numbers make sense. Faith doesn't ask how comfortable the journey will be. Faith says, if God said it, I'm going. Faith says, I don't see how this will work out, but I trust the one who called me. Faith doesn't worship provision. It worships the provider. And here's the core of the issue. The reason we're so obsessed with finding jobs, climbing ladders, and padding accounts is because deep down we're afraid that if we don't take care of ourselves, no one will. And that is a profound insult to a God who has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Do you really believe that? Or do you just say it in church while your heart still clings to fear? Because if you believe it, you wouldn't panic every time your plans fall apart. You wouldn't be driven by anxiety about your future. You wouldn't be so desperate to secure a position that you forget to seek His presence. What would happen? Really think about it. What would happen if you stopped striving for provision and started surrendering to purpose? What would happen if you stopped looking for jobs and started listening for instructions? What would change in your life if you actually believed God when He said He would provide? Because the truth is, provision is not your responsibility. Obedience is. And when you obey, when you follow where He leads, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it's risky, He will provide. Maybe not the way you imagined, maybe not the timing you wanted, but He will. Always. Don't build your life around making a living. Build it around following the voice of God. Don't teach your children to chase stability. Teach them to chase Christ. Don't ask God to bless your plans. Ask Him to break them if they're not His. He is not looking for clever people. He is not impressed with resumes. He's not moved by status. He's looking for people who will say, yes, Lord, no matter what it costs. People who will step out of the boat into the storm just because He said, come. People who are done with half-hearted, safe, calculated Christianity and are ready to live fully surrendered to the will of the Father. Because at the end of your life, the only thing that will matter is not what you earned, not what you built, not what title you carried. It's whether you obeyed the one who called you, whether you trusted Him enough to follow Him even when the world said you were crazy, whether you believed His voice above the voice of fear. So if you hear Him calling, obey. If He tells you to leave, go. If He says stay, stay. And don't look back. Don't try to drag the world's security with you into a kingdom that demands your absolute surrender. Burn the ships, bury the idols, say yes to God and never apologize for it, because provision follows obedience, always. This world doesn't just want your time, it wants your mind. It doesn't merely want you busy from 9 to 5, it wants your heart bowed down to its rhythm. The system of this world has never been neutral. It has always stood opposed to the purposes of God. And the great danger for us, especially for those who call themselves followers of Christ, is that we get so caught up in the flow of the world that we begin to think it's normal, even godly. We begin to believe the lie that if we're just decent, if we have a steady job, if we don't cause trouble and we take care of our families, we're somehow pleasing God. But God never asked for part of you. He never asked for a convenient compartment of your week. He wants all of you. And this world, with its structure and its systems, its schedules and ambitions, has one goal in mind: to distract you, to pull your eyes down from eternity, to get you to build here what was never meant to last. That's why people can spend 40 years building a career and still feel empty when they finally sit down, because you were never meant to find meaning there. This world wants to use you, shape you, then leave you with nothing. It trains you to work hard, yes, but not for the kingdom. It trains you to climb ladders, but not the one Jacob saw in his vision. It trains you to win, to succeed, to dominate, but not to serve. And all the while, it whispers that you are doing the right thing, that you're being wise, being responsible, that you're being a good citizen, a provider, a contributor. But what good is all that if you lose your soul in the process? What good is it if you spend your whole life building a name for yourself only to find out you never bowed your knee to His name? What good is it to be respected in the office if heaven never knew your voice in prayer? What good is it to retire comfortably if you never walked obediently? The world system is not just wrong, it's spiritual warfare. It offers you options that seem moral, acceptable, even commendable, but they are designed to replace the voice of God with the noise of the crowd. And the more you listen to that noise, the quieter His voice becomes. That's why some of you can't even hear Him anymore. You wonder why the fire has gone out, why the hunger has faded, why the word feels dry, why church feels like a routine. It's not because God has changed. It's because your ears are full of the world's language and you've lost the accent of heaven. Don't think for a moment that the devil needs to get you addicted to drugs or enslaved to lust to destroy your life. He's perfectly happy to let you be clean-cut and successful as long as you're disobedient. He'll help you find a steady job. He'll let you earn good money. He'll even let you go to church as long as you never fully surrender to God's call on your life. Because Satan doesn't fear a man with a job. He fears a man who's dead to the world and alive to Christ. And let's be honest, some of us are so in love with the world that we've baptized compromise and called it wisdom. We say, I need this job to survive, when what we really mean is, I trust money more than I trust God. We say, this is what's best for my family, when what we really mean is, I'm afraid to step out in faith. We say, God understands, when what we really mean is, I'm not willing to obey Him at the cost of my comfort. But friend, God is not asking for your comfort. He's asking for your cross. And crosses don't fit into the world's schedule. They don't come with retirement plans or safety nets. They come with blood. They come with death. And only through that death comes life. So many of you want resurrection power, but you refuse to go to the tomb. You want to live for eternity, but you don't want to die to time. You want to walk in the Spirit, but your calendar is ruled by the world, and you wonder why nothing changes. This world system is a seduction. It wants you busy but barren, loud but lifeless. It wants you convinced that you're doing enough, that you're okay, that God must be pleased, because you're moral, because you're polite, because you're better than most. But the measure is not morality. The measure is obedience. The measure is surrender. The measure is Christ. If your life fits perfectly into the mold of what everyone else is doing, then it should concern you. If your decisions look no different than the unbeliever next door, it should alarm you. If you're following a path that everyone else is on, you'd better stop and ask, where does this road actually lead? Because Jesus said something frightening. He said, wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. If the road you're on looks wide and comfortable and normal, maybe it's not the narrow one. The Spirit of God doesn't call you to be normal. He calls you to be set apart. He calls you out of the system. And that may mean rejecting some offers. That may mean walking away from opportunities that the world says are golden. That may mean letting go of dreams that were never God's in the first place. But I tell you the truth, whatever you give up for the sake of Christ, He will return to you 100-fold, not necessarily in dollars, not in applause, but in joy, in peace, in eternal reward, in purpose that doesn't fade. So you have a choice to make. You can keep letting the world mold you, or you can be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But you can't do both. You can't follow the system and follow the Savior. One leads to comfort and death. The other leads to a cross and resurrection. You choose.